Hi, I'm Justin Moorman.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to our next episode, Interoception with Kelly Mahler. We're really excited to have her on. Before we jump into the conversation, though, we just want to remind you, we would love for you guys to leave a review. Higher stars, obviously, the better. But we'll honestly, at this point, I think we'll take anything.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's it. That's what we're
just
at.
Drop it.
So honest feedback is great. Hopefully it's good feedback. If you're listening and you've listened a lot and you give us bad feedback, I feel like that's hypocritical. You're listening all the time, but,
yeah.
But that's okay. We are excited, though, to have Kelly on with us. I'm going to let Katie do a bio, kind of read through who Kelly is. Kelly, this is always slightly awkward. It's kind of Katie's version all the time of it, so you can correct things if you want afterwards. That's fine, and we'll jump into our conversation.
All right, here's Kelly from Katie's perspective. So here we go. All right, Kelly is a licensed occupational therapy that has found purpose and success with working with some of the most challenging students and supporting their regulation needs. Kelly is a self-proclaimed research nerd, which we so appreciate because I think that's how Justin and I first connected, that led her down the path of being an interoception. How'd I do?
Oh, we had a whole practice session before we started recording on how to say it.
Yeah, interoception. There you go. Expert. Kelly has done an amazing job of providing both resources and education to others for understanding of interoception. Butcher this,
you gotta stop looking at
the whole thing. I know.
You just gotta say it.
I can't.
Commit to it. Kate.
All right. Kelly is a noteworthy expert in the field and sought out after for speaker on behavior regulation and occupational therapy. Kelly has influenced our work by providing visuals, lessons, and tools to best teach our students about themselves. Kelly, thank you for making our job easier and for our students' lives better. It is an honor to have you join us to talk about a very important and misunderstood topic. Welcome to the podcast, Kelly.
Thank you. I liked the introduction. That was great, Katie. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we are going to jump in with some questions. I think this is a topic that a lot of people probably don't understand or have never heard of a lot of times, and that we've tried to ourselves explain to people at times, and we've got obviously only so much understanding of it. Okay, I thought you were going to say something.
No.
All right, so let's jump in. Kelly, first question. We've all heard of the five senses, right? Like the main five senses, but few people have heard of interoception. Can you share what interoception is?
Yeah. So
Can you tell us how to say it right, and then tell us what it is?
I hope the name doesn't scare anyone away because it is certainly not a sexy name. So hang in. I promise. Interoception has so much meaning to your life if you're listening. It is a sense in all of our bodies, and it's the newest sense that's being talked about by neuroscientists and doctors. And it really is a sense of how our body feels. So if you think about sensations that you might notice coming from your body, and it's going to be different for all of us, but maybe like it's a feeling of like a pounding heart or an empty stomach, or like when your muscles get sore or they feel relaxed, like all of these sensations coming from our body, we experience them because of interoception. And those sensations are so vitally important because it lets us know like how we're feeling and what our body needs for health, for regulation, etc. So obviously it applies greatly to behavior in the classroom and a lot of other things.
Yeah, that's such a good explanation. When I first heard about this was several years ago when I first heard about this, and it was from an occupational therapist I was working with. And I had her explain it a couple times, and I remember thinking, like, wait, what? Like, how is this? But then immediately tied it in to a situation with my own daughter. I was like, I don't think she understands forever. I didn't think she understood when she was hungry, and then like we would have to really explain to her, I think you're hungry. I think you're really upset right now because you're hungry. And I just always thought that was really weird. And then this occupational therapist I was working with was like, oh yeah, it's interoception. Like she doesn't understand some of those internal feelings. And I thought that was really interesting. Okay, so how does interoception support behavior? Because I think that's a big thing that people in education probably, it's one thing to understand it exists, right? But then to start making the connections between, well, how does that really impact my day-to-day life as a teacher or the day-to-day life of the students? So what kind of role does it have in behavior and how does it play into dysregulation?
Yeah, I mean, it has everything to do with behavior. If our body isn't feeling good, we're probably not going to be behaving very well. And that's true for every single one of us, right? And we know that, I mean, first of all, generally speaking, we live in a society that does not like really promote body listening, right? Like, so we're like, go, 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 busy, 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 screen, 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 screen. Like our attention is constantly pulled outside of our body. We're not
Hmm.
really like living in a society that's nurturing this body noticing and body understanding from even really young ages. But then we also know that for many of our students, they have genuine interoception differences. Like it could stem from trauma or neurodivergence. And there's many factors, but really, for a lot of those students, they are just completely out of touch with their body. They're not getting reliable signals, letting them know how they're feeling, letting them know what their body needs. So many times the result is dysregulation. Like they don't know how to take care of their body. And so they are relying on the adults in their world to make guesses. Like you were saying about your daughter, like you were making guesses about her body and like you saw her behavior. What is going on here? You're making respectful guesses about their internal experience, and you need that co-regulation support of an adult. But if we have a classroom full of kids that don't understand their bodies and they're all dysregulated and they all need the teacher to co-regulate, like that's an impossible thing to meet. And that's when things just get really, really, can get really messy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say part of the through us talking through this podcast, we've talked a lot about how classroom management is really classroom regulation. That is your class regulated or not, and how do you set the tone for that? And part of that work is, I think, the part that people miss with trauma informed care or trauma informed schools. They forget that you have to teach the kids about their body and give them opportunities. So we're looking at like behavior correction or like consequences and those kind of things. Part of it is the teaching, the intervention piece is starting to teach that child how to start feeling those sensations, understanding how their body works. And when they're able to do that, then they can start learning how to self-regulate themselves by listening to those type things. So it's kind of all those things you're talking about. Those things all have to be taught as part of an intervention program or pre-correction at tier 1 level in classrooms, and then that would help promote positive classroom management or regulation when we're able to do some of those things. So I know Kelly's going to share a little bit about some of our resources she has available, but she's got great lessons out there that you could teach in any of those settings. If you're like, I'm not an expert, I don't know how to get started, that is such a big part of supporting kids' behavior now in a different culture and climate. Like you said, our society is so different, so we need to approach some of those classroom things differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I may build upon
Yeah.
that, I think some of our past behavior-based strategies actually were derailing interoception learning. Like they pretty much condition a student to ignore how their body feels,
Hmm.
in order to please the adult in the room and get the reinforcer. So like we are just creating even more damage to the foundation that these kids actually need to, I'm using air quotes in case the listener can't see, to behave in the classroom. Like we're actually damaging the interoceptive learning that they need long term to be successful in that classroom.
Yeah. What trying to put myself in a listener's position right now. What age is like a normal, like quote unquote normal, typical, like as far as developmental? When you're talking about a lot of the interoception, just understanding on our own, what are kind of age ranges we expect that students can start and kids can start understanding those feelings inside their bodies?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. There's a lot we don't understand about interoception yet, and that's one of them, like what are the norms kind of thing. And
Mm.
I think it's going to be really hard to make norms or understand exactly what this should look like for each person because each of our internal experiences are so very different. And like what your body feels like when you're anxious is completely different than my experience. And like, so what we do know is that like every human body is born into this world with some degree of awareness of how their body feels. Like if you just think about the infants, like minute one, second one of life, they are wired to notice comfort and discomfort in their body. Now they probably don't understand like, oh, this is hunger, or oh, I'm cold, or oh, it's too bright in here, right? They just like notice like a discomfort and they express that in their own way. And that's what like cues the adults in their life to step in and to co-regulate, to figure out, use that curiosity, like what's going on inside the infant's body? What do they need right now for comfort? And that's like, that then evolves, like that process with the caregivers, like happens time and time again. And some kids, if they don't have other things going on, will start to learn more about their bodies. They'll start to learn like, oh, this feeling means I'm hungry. And oh, when my caregiver feeds me, that feeling goes away. Like, so they start to build this body knowledge, but there's so much, like we even talked about society and trauma and neurodivergence. There's so much that can impact that interoception growth. So basically, we know it's present at birth, and there's a lot of factors that either can support its growth or there's a lot of factors that can derail the growth of interoception.
Kelly, what happens? We know this first like 2 months and even this first 2 years are very critical in early development. What happens when typical attunement attachment, right? Those responses or those needs are not being met. How does that impact interoception? And then how do we get kids back on track with learning some of those things? So like a lot of kids with trauma, they're not being responded to, they're not being fed, they're not being held, they're not being comforted, or the warmth isn't there. So how do we start realigning or reintegrating that for kids to start learning those skills?
Yeah, I mean, that early life trauma is essentially sending messages like that their internal experience is not worthy of attention, both from other people and from themselves. Their bodies many times remain very painful and dysregulated. They have unmet needs, so they have to dissociate from that internal experience to survive the world. So then they get to us at school, right? And they're completely dissociated and disconnected. And we're like, you need to self-regulate. And if you can't self-regulate, then you're termed to having challenging behavior, right? It's this whole cycle. And then we put you in compliance methods, and we're going to just destroy your interoception even more. So the good news is, like, there is so many positive outcomes with interoception work. Not only can interoception kind of be derailed, but like we said, it's changeable in the other direction as well. And we are like, it is so cool to watch kids learn about their bodies, to discover like that they have these clues in their body. And it's really cool to watch them understand too that their body is different than another person's body. And they're both correct and valid in that experience. So we're not telling them or teaching them how anger should feel in their body. They're discovering it for themselves. And we're not telling them like, oh, deep breathing for everybody, because it's not going to work for everybody, right? They have to know their body and find the things that uniquely help to regulate their body and help their bodies to feel good. And we're just watching this growth, and it's really, really cool to see.
So that's where, from a teacher perspective, that's where it can start to get hard. I would imagine. I can imagine sitting around listening to this and being like, "Well, but there are things. How am I supposed to teach a class, or how am I supposed to help this along while I'm teaching everything else I'm teaching?" What are some ways that we can really be intentional as teachers, like in a typical classroom, right, where we can help kids along? What are simple things maybe that we can do to help kids along in this process?
Um, I don't want to say it's simple per se, because there's a
Sure.
caveat here, but one of the best things I feel like that educators can start doing is just to start modeling their own interoceptive process out loud. Kind of take the mystery out of it, like demonstrate that they have signals they're paying attention to. So you could be like, oh gosh, like my eyes are hurting so bad. Like these overhead lights, oh, they're hurting my eyes. Maybe I need to dim the light. So they're just modeling that. They're putting that interoception language out there, like my eyes hurt or my stomach feels empty. They're just starting to model that. And they're not, and that can be done within their existing routines. The reason I say that's not simple is, of course, you have to think a little differently because interoception is so new, but also that requires educators to listen to their bodies. And again, they are living in a society where that is not celebrated. Like, how many educators do we know that even get to eat lunch when their body feels hungry, or they get to use the bathroom when their body says they need to use the bathroom, right? Like, so just it is such a shift in really connecting to your own body as an educator. I mean, at least it was for me, speaking from personal experience, but then also to be modeling that out loud in front of your classroom, like it's quite a shift.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is, and I think what you said too is really good. The fact that how many adults out there really understand well what their body's telling them all the time. One of the things that we've done when we've trained people before is we'll have them go through this process of body mapping. Do you want to talk about that just like a little bit, real
Oh,
quick? Just
yeah, I
like,
can. Yeah. And I totally stole from Dr. Lori too, so I should be honest. But yeah, we have to do body mapping and then also looking at like the polyvagal chart and just rating where they felt like there's something like you two are all over the map during the day, but your body has the skills and whereabouts enough to kind of put yourself back in a regulation spot. You could be dysregulated at some point in the morning, and then you come back down to a regulated state to like a really sad state at some point. And we're all over the place during the day, but the goal is that our kids are probably very much in the same position. Some kids have those coping skills and some kids are not, and that's where we're teaching and learning them, and then trying to get them to be more self-aware, basically.
And what we find is every time we do that, there are so many of the teachers or the adults that we're working with that really had never given it thought before.
Yeah.
Which is, I really think, that's what we've run into. It's not that people don't care about it; it's that people didn't even realize it was something they needed to give thought to before. And so then when we look at like older students, because sometimes when we talk about any number of things, it can feel like it's directed towards young students right away. Partly because that's where a lot of work happens. That's less conventional, maybe. I guess I don't know how to else describe that. But the reality is, there are plenty of juniors and seniors and 45-year-olds out there that really don't have a good understanding of how their body feels and why it feels that way and what to do about it. And I think that's important. Even still, like your example, so easy still to, as adults, model for even for our high school classes, our middle school classes. This is how I'm feeling, why, and it gives permission for the students to do so. Do you? And this is going to be maybe a weird question. You may not have an answer to this, but you are the expert. So Kelly, I kind of expect you to answer. Do you think that this has? I know it's a newer area of study overall, but do you think that this lack of awareness is increasing as our students are in such a busy world?
Yeah, I mean, this is only a guess. It's not based on evidence, but yes, I do believe that our kids are growing less and less aware. And I think there's so many factors contributing to that. It's like the societal, cultural things we already talked about, but also they just lived through a major trauma of COVID. I mean, there's so many factors. Their parents also, could have been experiencing trauma during that time. So then the parental interoception is like, kind of derailed. So yeah, I think there's so many factors, but yes, just in a nutshell, I do feel like the kids these days are more and more out of touch.
Yeah. I had never thought about, until you, like, honestly, when you were talking about it just a few minutes ago, I had never thought about the societal impact of how much we're on the go and how little time that offers any of us, regardless of age, the adults, the kids, anybody, to like really slow down and understand how we're feeling. So that's kind of why I wondered if and again, it's all kind of new, but that's kind of why I wondered about that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make this connection too with like nature-based education. As we keep on saying, get kids outside, start being aware of your senses. We just did the top educational research from 2024, and that stop telling your kids to read about a poem about nature. Like, they need to go out and experience nature. Like, the video does not replace the experience. And there's a lot of popular work out right now on grounding, which I would imagine really ties into your work as well, and just getting kids to be more mindful outside. And so I know one thing we did at our school was put in a meadow space. There was not a nature space. And I try to encourage teachers to get them out there as much as possible. It's so amazing how many kids are afraid to be outside, like with bugs. And that was like a shock and awe when that first happened. They just weren't sure what to do, because a lot of kids don't have an opportunity. They didn't go hiking with their parents during COVID or those kind of things to even be self-aware enough.
Yeah.
So, what are some common either misconceptions or maybe even lack of understandings or any kind of pushback you get when you are first talking to people about interoception?
I don't really get a ton of pushback. What do we hear for so many people? The pushback is the word itself, honestly. Nobody wants to listen to a podcast about interoception. It's just automatic shutdown. So, but once we start talking about it, people are like, oh, like they just have personal connections. Like they just didn't know there was a word to describe it. And I feel like interoception is maybe pushing back on kind of some conventional approaches and theories that we've had in the past. Like we've talked about the compliance. And, I was trained to label my students' emotions. It helps them understand how they're feeling. And what we're finding out from so many people is that when we label someone else's emotions, like, oh, it looks like you're frustrated right now, like we are at a high chance of being wrong. And so if you are a student that's constantly having your felt experience mislabeled by other people, you start to doubt yourself. Like maybe I'm the one that's wrong about my experience. If all these other people say that I look frustrated or I'm hungry, so it's just like really updating my practice at every turn in profound ways. But I think that's what, it's all about. Like if we don't look back to what we were doing 5 or 10 years ago, then it's probably evidence we're not growing.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like that idea of potentially leading kids astray in some way, I guess, where they might be feeling. It's really offering so much space for them to understand it themselves, kind of like you said earlier. I think that's really so much of the key. And but that again requires time and space to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or unfortunately, I think too, it's just spending the time and prioritizing the professional development around this concept. We spend so much time on PBIS and all these other state mandated type things. And it's like, we were talking to a group of educators the other day. I'm like, behavior is pretty simple. It's relational connection, occurrency, and regulation, which comes through, right? Kids understanding their bodies and or co-regulation, depending on where they're at in that journey. If you can figure out those two really simple things, like all this other research and like all these have tos are great, but it really comes boiling down to like, if you can do those two things well, like you're gonna be all right.
Yeah.
What is it that you like when you're first introducing this concept to people? What do you find? Because there's gonna be people out here that are listening to this that maybe have never known, but then there are gonna be people that are like, yeah, I'm really interested in this. This is life changing potentially for me to understand that this even exists, and that it's a different way of us experiencing the world that's really kind of within us, I guess. Um, what advice could you give to people to to kind of catch other people's attention? How like what are the things that are like the quick things to explain to somebody to help them understand that this is an important topic?
I always try to look at like what exactly is going to get them to buy in. Like, what are their pain points, and how does interoception relate to that? I don't. So, like for example, I was just consulting on a student who the team kept saying he's an awful like he's not good in the morning. Like it's just mornings are rough, and he's like an afternoon learner. He's a different kid, and we were like really trying to figure out what was going on. And what we discovered is we kept asking questions and being more curious, and we talked to the student as well. But as soon as he ate and then went out to recess, he was a completely different kid. So we were talking about, okay, like what is he getting in his body? He's getting food, he's getting a lot of regulation being outside, and then he's coming back and he's all of a sudden this amazing afternoon learner. Like what could be going on? And so we were really relating interoception to that scenario, and that student wasn't noticing signs of hunger. He wasn't noticing signs of dysregulation in his body. And the team didn't understand interoception. So they were just assuming he was, kind of doing these things to, just kind of be oppositional or whatever term they wanted to give because they were frustrated, and I felt for them. Like if you don't understand what's happening, of course, like we're trained to kind of jump to those conclusions. So I try to like bring interoception into light into whatever a person's pain point is. So in that scenario, it was a really big pain point for this team, and we're going to be working on helping him to understand his body better. But in the meantime, we're going to make sure that he has lots of snacks offered to him all morning long, that we increase his regulation input all morning long. We're going to kind of do that through co-regulation, but eventually we want him to understand his own body so that he's not relying on other people to help manage those needs.
Kelly, how do you change the spin? Because I know a lot of time we talk about kids with trauma or mental health or maybe neurotypical kids with bigger behaviors because of whatever factors. But I also think another big behavior, we talk about behavior at school, autism. Obviously, a lot of people aren't sure how to address kids with autism. With the communication delays sometimes that come with autism, how do you, what supports do you provide those classrooms or families when we talk about this concept in terms of other than like visual supports, obviously, but is there any like tips or tricks you can offer for families that or educators that are experiencing students with autism with some behavioral challenges?
Yeah, I definitely want to make sure that there's some kind of communication support, whether it's high tech, it's light tech. And in those communication supports, there is a way for that student to start to express the way their body feels, whether it's just my body is uncomfortable and comfortable. Like we just have to start getting at it. I feel like there's so many, especially neurodivergent students that have unmet medical needs and lots of pain things happening. So how can we not only work on them understanding their body, but also that communication piece is going to be so essential. And we do have like something called the interoception curriculum, which is a very structured framework for following to help people to really learn about their body. And I started that curriculum with autistic students, but now we use it with we were doing tier 1 interventions during social emotional learning time with it. And so all students are getting, because I mean, I wish I would have had this knowledge about my body when I was younger. I've been on my own personal interoception journey, and I just can't believe the things I've learned. And why did it take me so long to learn this stuff about my body?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we hear a lot as people even understand that this exists, right? Because, like you said, it's a word that it sounds big, right? But it's the concept of it that still we don't give a lot of thought to because it's drilled into us so much that you're experiencing everything from the outside. But then it's like we almost like weirdly say, well, all the inside feelings are just feelings or something like that. We don't understand that it's actually there's physical stuff going on within us, and that really impacts our everyday life, right? And it's pretty surprising how many of us have just never given too much thought to that. So it's really good to like the earlier we can teach anybody, obviously it's going to be more beneficial for them to be able to get this kind of information and start learning what their body is telling them.
Yeah, especially educators. Sometimes we're so quick to like talk to a student and we're not listening to our body to understand, like, here's some signs and symptoms that maybe this is not the best time to address this right now. Or at home, right? Like kids, spouse, right? Like you start figuring out those things, you'll improve a lot of your relationships pretty quickly. And it's never perfect. I'm still figuring it out.
No.
But yeah, I think it's good when you start being mindful of those kind of things for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there were some shifts that could be made in classrooms that you think would be important, maybe not complete overhauls of how we do things, right? But if there was just some small shifts that teachers could make, I know you talked about expressing themselves, like and kind of talking through themselves. Are there any other things that could be like real actionable items that somebody could walk away? They listen to this, they're like, oh, that could be something I could do. That's a minor shift, but that could have a decent impact that you'd want people to give a shot to.
Potentially like maybe just offering some more curiosity about a student's internal experience, like using some simple questions to kind of be like, what's going on? Like notice your body's moving this way. How's it feeling? Or like getting away from like when we're labeling someone's emotion, that's us interpreting what we see, instead shifting that to a place of curiosity and really trying to understand like what is this experience like for you? How is your body feeling? And they might not be able to tell you, and that gives you another clue like, oh, like maybe this needs to be more supported, and it's not going to happen just by like one general educator with a classroom full of kids. We might need a little bit more support here, but I think just offering that curiosity. Some kids have never had anyone really be that curious about their internal experience. It's quite of like an experience for some of them. So yeah, I think it's the modeling out loud, being really curious about the student's internal experience. And if you have like some kind of social emotional learning time, maybe doing some more structured interoception work during that time could be really beneficial.
Yeah, the curiosity is such a big deal. And again, I think it's not a knock on any teachers. All of us are busy, right? Like we all have a set amount of stuff that we have to get done. We bring it up probably too much on here, but it's reality that most districts, most classrooms, you feel like there's more time that you're supposed to be doing stuff than there is actual time in the day.
Yeah.
And so then you're stuck like, how do I possibly do this? But I think that idea that being more curious could really lead to just more information and can really not just give you more information as the educator, but can really give the student more information as well and help them learn about themselves in a way that, again, could be actually pretty life changing if you start figuring some small things out. It's worth it. I think I always say when we say this a lot too, you're going to spend the time somewhere. right? You're ultimately going to be spending the time dealing with helping this student out, dealing with various maybe behaviors that we're not a huge fan of. You're going to be spending the time. How do you decide you want to spend the time? Do you want to spend it on the front end, really trying to figure out some of these things and help it like be solved? Or do you want to spend it by constantly sending a student to an office and filling out paperwork and doing all these things, which really ends up costing you so much more time in the end, even if it doesn't feel like it in a moment, you know? And that's hard. I think that's hard for educators to do sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say just a couple like quick things that we did that kind of piggyback on what Kelly said was we do have like a little reset area and there's like some visuals for kids to think about if I'm coming up for a break. And that's like going for a break is an okay thing. Like you're allowed to take a break at our school. It's in the main lobby area. There's adults that will, like if you're there a little too long, we'll prompt you on back to class. But there's things like there's some body awareness type things, some sensation, feelings, vocabulary, like emotional vocabulary there. There are some quick little cards that you can do for some breaks. There's sensory things, there's coloring, like lots of things for different types of body regulation that you may need to support, but also to label and feel that if like you do need to talk to somebody, there's some visual supports for that. There's a really great fifth grade teacher that we have. And one thing I love when I go in to observe his class is that he'll say, we're going to just take a 2 or 3 minute little stretch break. But what he's doing, he's letting kids find, before they get into another big thing, he's letting kids find whatever they need to do. There's not like a huge parameters on it, but allowing the kids to kind of figure out what their bodies need at that moment before he restarts and regains their attention again. Those are like 2 real small shifts, right, that you could do that aren't a huge disruption to your classroom environment. They make a difference.
And do you think, I guess, Kelly, this is another question for you, and I won't keep you around forever, but how long do you think, we talked about slowing down and that idea that we don't really do a great job of slowing down, that we're constantly on the move. How little amount of time can we slow down and still have it be impactful, do you think? Like, is there like, is slowing down for 2 minutes, is that even worth it? Or is that potentially impactful?
Well, that would be a really fascinating study to have different groups slowing down for different increments of time and seeing what the magic window is.
There's our research study, Kelly.
Yeah.
It's birth right here.
Do it.
Let's do it.
I am a fan, like that we even have like a deck of interoception activity cards and they are 30 seconds or less. And I encourage teachers to just pull one out. It's just kind of like a little mini break. You know, everyone does it together. They can all share how their body is feeling. We point out like, look how different we each are. This is so cool. We validate everyone's experience and then we move on for the day. And I feel like even that is better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want people to hear that too. I think that's super important. Like, it doesn't take, we're not saying take 15 minutes of your 41-minute period, right? I mean, if you can, that's great. Like, I mean, it's probably not going to hurt anything. But we're really saying like any time at all, like being intentional. I think that's so much of a part of it. If we just are expecting it to accidentally happen, it's probably not going to happen. We're probably not going to do it. So we have to be intentional about taking some time. And that can make a huge difference, whether it's a stretch break, whether it's just letting a slow start, right? A little soft start to every class period, however you want to describe it is fine. But I think that's important. And I think sometimes we can do it intentionally in a directed way that really can help students along. So I think that's really good. That's an important thing for people to hear. Katie, before we kind of jump into as we start to wrap this up, we want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that Kelly has going on and some of the stuff that you have that's available to people.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kelly just recently published, right? That just came out. There's your new lessons book and there's cards you can buy online. There's free resources that you can subscribe to Kelly. We'll send you some information. And you have so much educational materials available for people that are, if you don't know, if you got interested in what we talked about today, and we really believe this is like the forefront of how like behavior starts becoming reformed, go on Kelly's website. It's Kelly-Mahler, right? .com, and then it's Mahler.
Mahler, you did it. You saw my face immediately.
Yeah. Kelly Mahler. I'm sorry, I want to say Mahler. Kelly Mahler. It's Kelly-Mahler. Mahler. Oh my God, you got me. .com. I'm going to link it with the podcast. We'll have it linked, but go there, and she's got an enormous amount of resources. Kelly, do you want to plug anything specific that's coming up or things for people to check out?
No, I just hope that, I mean, we're very passionate about free resources. So I really hope that everything we have on my website, as well as like we have a YouTube channel with lots and lots, like probably an overwhelming amount of videos, but it's free content. You can check it out there.
Yeah, and your Facebook page, really, if you just like follow her on Facebook, you have a lot of stuff that comes out that's really quick hits. If your attention span's 35 seconds like the rest of her, there's some good things that come out with quick hits and stuff. So I know we have some of your resources and they're great. And I would say for building principles, your OTs don't get a lot of professional development or resources from schools, and they play such a vital role. So this might be something you consider purchasing for your OT PT to kind of help support students even at that level as well.
Yeah.
Have lots of on-demand courses too. So for that continuing ed.
Yes, so important.
Well, Kelly, one of the ways we always end is we just ask, what is one thing you want people to walk away knowing? If you could kind of have them just listening and remembering one thing. I'm going to have Katie go first.
Okay.
So you have time to think about it. Hopefully Katie doesn't steal yours, but it's okay if she does. It's okay if she does. And then I'll have you go, and then I'll kind of wrap us up. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, Katie, what do you want people to walk away knowing?
I would say that what Kelly was here talking about today is really, really important. If you're like behavior's overwhelmed, the class feels, my teacher has poor classroom management, or it feels dysregulated, or I'm coming home every day and I feel unsettled, or work sounds overwhelming as an educator, I really encourage you to dive into this topic, because once you understand this is what's going to help you as an educator. Think about your educator state of mind and regulation, which is key for your classroom regulation. You are the leader of the regulation practices, and it is going to teach your kids how to be preventative in terms of that regulation, or regain regulation when dysregulated. But they can't do that if they don't understand their own bodies. And we're so quick to teach kids about regulation, self-regulation at such an early age, when it's really co-regulation first, and teaching them about this so that they're able to eventually self-regulate. So be patient with kids. Sometimes it takes some direct instruction and some noticing and those kind of things. And Kelly's resources are a great place to start.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, Kelly, you get to follow up Katie. What's one thing you would like people to walk away knowing? It can be more than one. It can be more than one if you want it to be. But what's one thing you want people to walk away knowing?
I feel like it kind of echoes what Katie said, but I'm going to put a little slogan to it.
Okay.
Okay. Body wisdom over behavior system. What do you think? So do you know what I mean by that? So we need to build that behavior, or I'm sorry, that body wisdom, help people understand their bodies, because that can be a more successful approach eventually over these behavior systems or compliance methods that we might have used in the past. And I feel like this just gets at the heart of why I hear from so many educators why they even got into this field as it is. Like, interoception is an empathetic approach. It's us seeking to understand the deep whys behind why we're seeing what we're seeing. It helps us to understand that person's unique internal experience, and it really like speaks to so many educators' hearts of like, that's why they got into this profession. Like, they just want to make a difference. They want to be empathetic and compassionate. And so I feel like we just have to figure out how to revamp the entire educational system. But until then, find small little ways to build that behavior, that body wisdom. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the work you're doing, Kelly, is doing just that. So just know it's really important.
Yeah, I think that was great, and that I love that body wisdom too. I think that carries with it such this feeling to me as soon as I heard it, of like coming alongside, right? It's like a very coming alongside somebody, and again, it's less systematic. There's not systems to it potentially, but like it's a less systematic, kind of cold feeling approach that maybe we've had in the past about approaching things, and it's much more of something that's coming alongside, putting your arm around somebody figuratively or realistically, and being in it with them. And I think that really carries a lot of weight. I think for me, the thing that stuck with me, I already mentioned more than once, but it's that, and it's a hot point for me anyway. It's come up many times on this podcast, right? Like we're going too fast in so many ways, and it is so important for us to slow down. Not just because it's the right thing to do in a society, not because it's we get too overwhelmed. It's a bunch of reasons. We are not made to go as fast as we're going. So many of us, and and it leads to a lot of different problems, and it has a lot of times very little to do with the students, because the students are moving, a lot of times are children of all ages all the way up through high school. They're moving at our pace, right? And so we've gotten ourselves into a spot as adults where we're moving too fast, and unintentionally we are bringing the kids along with us, and they're moving too fast too, and it's not the way that we're made to work. And so hear that from Kelly, hear it from me again. There is a lot of importance in slowing down and being able to listen to ourselves and being able to listen to each other. And I think in doing that, we're going to learn a whole lot. Kelly, we thank you so much for coming on. We really enjoyed this. This is really good. It's just a nice, easy conversation. And I just think that there's a ton that everybody can learn from diving into your resources, hopefully from this podcast. If it's something that you enjoyed and you're listening, share it with somebody and start checking out a lot of Kelly's resources, because I really think there's going to be stuff that you're going to find is useful and can make minor shifts that make huge impacts in how you're doing things with students. So Kelly, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and let's all go out there and do the work.
Let's go do it. Thanks.
Hey everybody, let's keep the conversation going.
Like and subscribe below and keep the comments rolling.